Wow. It's been quite a bit since I've actually done one of these. But yeah, I've kind of gotten back into Magic the Gathering, especially the Commander format mainly. So I decided that maybe it'd be kind of fun to do some like deck profiles of where the decks currently were at where I last left off. So I can kind of use this as like a way to kind of track the progress for the decks, and also I guess to showcase, how far the deck has grown. So with that being said, we're going to be jumping into it. We're going to first start off with my very favorite Commander deck, I would say, Krenko Mob Boss. This is actually one of the first Magic products I've ever bought back in like 2012 or 2013, where I actually picked up the deck with Krenko Mob Boss as a creature. So basically, CMC of 4, you get to tap it, you get to basically double your goblins. So obviously what we're going to be doing is just spamming as many goblins as we possibly can and then using them as potential resources. So Krenko is really good for that. Also, my friend gave me an alternate copy of it, so it's kind of cool choosing the flavor that we want to go with. And also, pretty much like, aside from like certain cards in the like the lands, it is kind of foiled out, so just keep that in mind as well. We're playing a copy of Lightning Greaves. Again, just a really good card to be able to keep providing protection for Krenko, and also, again, equip cost 0 is really nice. We are playing one Goblin Recruiter. Goblin Recruiter is really good. When it comes into play, you can basically search your library for a number of Goblin cards, reveal them, then put them on the deck in any order. What's really cool with this is you can set this up really well with Goblin Ringleader. So you can basically tutor 4 Goblins for pretty much nothing. Because you could summon a Recruiter, get your Goblins, make sure you put Ringleader on the next one you're going to draw, and then just choose the next 4 you're going to be drawing into. So it's really awesome that allows you to basically tutor out what you want to. Mogwar Marshal, basically when he enters the battlefield or dies, he basically leaves a token copy of himself of a 1/1. So just, again, creating more goblins. And honestly, just cheap goblins are actually pretty good in the deck too. Dragon Fodder, you pay 2, you get to create 2 goblins. 2 mana for 2 is not bad at all. Throne of the God Pharaoh. This is actually can sometimes be an alt win condition, just depending on how far you are into your combos. But at the at the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses life equal to the number of tap creatures you control. So if you basically have 40 gobbies who just are tilted sideways, tapped, you win pretty much. One Tormenting Voice. We don't have a whole lot of draw in the deck, unfortunately, that doesn't break the deck. So this is a pretty good substitute. You get the discard a card, draw the card. You can discard things like Anger and some other things that are just not super useful, and just try to dig through your deck for the combo pieces. Battle Mage's Bracers. Basically, the idea is to give this to Krenko, give it haste, and then you get to be able to pay 1 and then basically copy the ability. So just making more goblins. Kind of the same thing with the Illusion's Bracers as well. Sea Gauge Commander. When he enters the battlefield, he brings 3 gobbies with him, and he can also sacrifice 1 and pay 2 mana to be able to ping for some damage, which is also it could be pretty good. Ashnod's Altar. Again, you're creating sometimes infinite goblins, so being able to sacrifice them to add 2 colors to your mana pool is really good. So if you combine this with things like Krenko and Skirk Prospector, you can sometimes just go infinite mana. Runvelt Horde Master. Other goblins you control get a +1/+1/+ whenever he or another goblin dies. You get to exile the top card of your library. If it's a goblin creature, you may cast until the end of the next turn. We're playing tribal. Pretty much 33-ish% of our deck is literally goblins. Then the rest is basically like, lands, and then of course, spells and shit. But yeah, we play a ton of goblins, of course. Krenko's Ting Street Krenko Ting Street Kingpin. Kind of like the same idea, but this guy's actually pretty cool. Whenever he attacks, you put a 1/1 counter on him, then create a number of 1/1 red goblin creature tokens equal to his power. And we have plenty of ways to actually augment our goblins' powers. You can use things like Coat of Arms to be able to make them even more stronger. And we also have a lot of passive effects too, such as Trash Master to be able to give our goblins more strength anyway. Dockside Extortionist. So this is a really good... Hello?
Hey, Metallic, I don't know how to tell you this, but Dockside Extortionist is now banned.
What do you mean it's banned?
Yeah, it was actually banned with a few other powerful cards.
Oh.
Yeah. It's, very unfortunate for your goblins. So be sure to replace the card with something else so we can end this little skit that you're doing.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Sorry for the interruption. In place of Dockside Extortionist, we threw in a Pyre of Heroes. Basically, you pay 2, you tap it, you sacrifice a creature, you get to search your library for basically another goblin with a converted mana cost equal to 1 or plus that monster's mana cost. And then you get to drop it onto the field. So it could be kind of a cool way just to be able to remove a goblin that's already suited its purpose and be able to get something out a little bit better and more suitable to your situation. 1 coat of arms. Basically, it just, for every goblin you have that shares its type, it gets a +1/+1. So basically, all your goblins are going to become really big, really fast. We have Battle Hymn. It's a really good instant that allows you to basically get 1 floating red mana for each goblin you control. And again, you can easily make, hundreds of goblins, so you could sometimes just have endless mana for days. Still back Chief. When you enter the battlefield, you get to put 2 more goblins in the future. A lot of our creatures tend to just basically bring more goblins with them because we just want to have strength in numbers. Vanquisher's Banner, you're obviously going to choose Goblin. They get a +1/+1. And then anytime you cast a Goblin creature, you get to draw a card. Isn't that lovely? We're having Hammer of Perforos. Again, name of the game, this is a very fast deck. I like to think so. And Hammer of Perforos just does a really good job of just giving all your creatures haste. And it's an enchantment, so it kind of gives it's a bit more difficult to get rid of. We have Goblin King. All goblins get +1/+1 and 1 have Mountain Walk. So again, if you're playing against your pod and somebody has a mountain, it just basically makes them so they're unblockable, which just means that you're going to be able to go in for your consistent damage. Or it forces them to have to use resources to deal with it. We have Goblin War Chief, one of my favorite cards, honestly, for the deck. He does everything you pretty much want. He does mana reduction, and he also gives all your other goblins haste. This dude is literally so good. And then here's Goblin Ringleader, kind of like a really good card on its own. But again, the idea mainly is to combine him with Recruiter, so you can be able to basically just tutor 4 goblins for essentially 4 mana if you really think about it, which is kind of insane. Then we have Goblin Lackey, one of the ults. Whenever he deals damage, you get to put a goblin permanent from your hand onto the battlefield. Again, we're playing tons of goblins, so just having to be able to way to cheat them out is really nice. Perforos, God of the Forge. When it's if your devotion is less than 5, it's not a creature, but whenever another creature enters the battlefield your control, your opponents take 2. So again, just basically making a ton of goblins. They all just start pinging your opponent for 2 each. Really good. And again, being an enchantment, honestly, having it as an enchantment is just really nice because it's also indestructible too. Mana Echoes. Man, this thing was insane. Fun fact, before this thing got much cheaper, this is actually a wedding gift from the best man himself. But I love this card. Whenever a goblin basically enters play, you get to add 1 mana for each creature you control that shares a creature type with it. So yeah, you just play 1 goblin, you're gonna get a lot of mana. We generated a lot of mana. Muxus Gumban Grandeed is basically the same concept kind of as a Goblin Ringleader, but kind of up a higher level. Because when you enter the battlefield, reveal the top 6 from your library. And you put all goblin creatures with converted mana cost of 5 or less onto the battlefield. That's insane. And then whenever he attacks, he gets a +1/+1 for each other goblin he controls. So he basically brings the entire crew with them and then just does damage. It's so good. Relentless Assault. Untap all creatures after this turn, and then after the main phase, you get an additional combat phase, followed by an additional main phase. This is actually pretty cool because, again, one of the main things that it does is it untaps all your creatures, right? So if you decided to attack with Krenko that turn for whatever reason, just to put it for aggression, you get to untap him and then just start swinging again, or even just tapping him for his ability. Really, really good. Anger, one of our best discarding cards that we can be able to use to be able to get all of our creatures haste. And thankfully, we don't see a whole lot of Bajuka Bog these days, at least in my pods. So yeah, just having Anger in the graveyard, always really, really good. It makes me very less angry, by the way. Goblin Matron, basically a tutor. When it enters the battlefield, you get to search your library for a goblin and then add it to your hand. Of course, you can set it up, you could summon Matrion and then choose to grab Recruiter, and then depending on how much mana you can dish out, you can either go for your Ringleader play that I mentioned earlier, or even the Muxus, whatever you want to do. We have 1 copy of Magatha's Wheel. Again, we don't have a whole lot of draw, but when we do, we typically just refill our entire hand. So Magus of the Wheel does a great job at doing that. Goblin Rabblemaster. They force all of our creatures to attack, basically, which, if able, which is whatever. He does come with a goblin every turn when it goes to your beginning of your combat step. And then whenever Goblin Master attacks, it gets +1/+0 for each other goblin attacking creature. The third ability is whatever, honestly, just because they're usually pretty big anyway. But, you know, just having a new goblin coming onto the field every turn is really nice, especially when you have things like, you know, mana echoes or coat of arms. So it can get pretty crazy pretty quickly. Staff of Domination, one of my favorite cards, just because it does so much. You can untap it by using a colorless mana, and then of course you're going to mainly do the untapping target creature and just be able to abuse and make as many Krenko spams as you want. But of course, everything just being colorless with this card is very easy to abuse. 1000-Year Elixir, again, just another way to give ourselves a quicker activation of Krenko's ability and to untap him as well. Blood Moon. Blood Moon is just mainly there to kind of like, I guess, inhibit your opponent's plays, because if they're playing a multicolored deck, if you just play Blood Moon, it just makes everything mountains, which can kind of screw with their mana, you know, colors, which is nice for us to kind of like keep going up, because it's not going to really mess with us anyway. Unfortunately, since I had to sell off my Ancient Tomb, we barely have any like a lot of our lands are mountains. Legion Warboss, another really good card as well. At the beginning of your combat turn, you get to create a 1 red goblin creature token that gives haste, and it must attack. So it basically just keeps on creeping more of them. Krenko's Command, basically the same idea as Dragon Water, basically. Impact Tremors, this thing is insane, honestly. So with Impact Tremors, whenever creatures enter the battlefield under your control, you get to deal 1 to each opponent. So that's kind of fun. That's kind of fun, is it not? We have Reforge the Soul. With Reforge of the Soul, it's good for the miracle cost because it basically becomes you pay 2 and you get to draw 7. But again, it's just more draw, so it's kind of like a more expensive version of Magus of the Wheel. Warren Investigator, or Warren Instigator, it's basically the same thing as Goblin Lackey, but a little bit better because it has double strike. So you could put 2 if he actually gets, you know, through. So really like him. Squeeb Goblin Nabob. Squeeb, basically at the beginning of your end upkeep, you could choose to add him back to your graveyard from the hand. So he basically just becomes, you know, something you can constantly reuse. You can, you know, sacrifice off a Skur. You can discard it off with like Tormenting Voice. So there's just a lot of application for Squeeb. Skirk Prospector, one of the best cards in the deck by far. You basically sacrifice a goblin and you get to add a floating red mana. So of course, making almost infinite goblins means infinite mana. Thunderbite Staff. Quick creature, they get the tap 2, then deals 1 to target creature, but whenever a creature is put into the graveyard from play, untap this creature. So basically the idea is to pretty much equip it to Krenko, sacrifice a goblin off of like Skirk Prospector or something. Krenko's gonna get untapped. You can tap Krenko. You get the point. Thunderbite Staff basically just makes it so we can make infinite goblins pretty much at that point, which is pretty good. Legion Loyalist, honestly, it's a 1/1 with haste. It's a goblin. Cheap, quick goblins. We like that. Eldrazi Monument. Honestly, this card is... So I initially wanted this into the deck because I wanted something that gave all of our goblins like flying. Because unfortunately for the longest time, like we just had no answers to flying. This solved that, but it's never come up again. It gives us all of our creatures as hit indestructible, which is also really nice too and a little bit stronger. Sacrificing a creature is literally not even much of a cost because it's just so easy to do. Mog Catcher, basically, it's another way to tutor out any goblin. You tap 3 and then, or you pay 3, tap it, and then you get to put a goblin card from your library into play. Pretty sick. Soul Ring, because, you know, this is Commander. We're playing Soul Ring. Hobgoblin Bandit Lord. Gives all the other goblins +1/+1. And of course, if you're ever like really late into the game and you have an established board and you just want to, you know, knock somebody out, you could just, you know, pay the floating. So he deals damage equal to the number of goblins that enter the battlefield under your control this turn to any target. Honestly, that's not... It sounds kind of specific, but it's really not. You know, Krenko, you can get him to keep on making more goblins, untapping him, so you can do quite a bit. Wordling Burst, you pay 3, you get 3 goblins. Pretty good. Hazardous Monument, and being in red, it's well known that we don't have a lot of ramp, like in the traditional sense with like, you know, land ramping. So having mana reduction is really good. Plus, whenever you cast a creature spell, you can discard a card and draw the card. So essentially, now that we have like ways of reducing our mana cost for how much it costs to actually play a creature, you know, just being able to discard a card and then drawing as you're playing the deck is really nice. And then next we have a copy of Thought Vessel. Honestly, with Thought Vessel, like, it's fine. It's not the ideal card, honestly. I think I'd probably rather have something like, maybe like a Ruby Medallion, honestly, just for a little bit more reduction for our red spells, or even maybe something like, even Arcane Signet, just so I have access to, you know, red mana as opposed to just colorless. But I suppose having access to no hand sides is also kind of nice. Or to be completely honest with you, that doesn't really come up too often. So, but again, we're going to be switching this out for like a Ruby Medallion, which I'll have an update here periodically as well for it. Goblin Shuriken. Again, 1, Cheap Goblin, 0-2. Sacrificing a Goblin to generate a target creature, though, is pretty nice. Pretty nice. Faithless Looting for some more draw power. Blasphemous Act for a little bit of burn damage. Again, whether if our goblins are stronger than 13/13, by no means is that a difficult thing to do. It's just really nice. Plus, again, with being 9 but having so many goblins, it'll make it pretty much almost free. Raging Goblin, again, same idea. It's a 1 with haste. Rush? No, this isn't the right game. We have Trash Master. So I like Trash Master because he does make all your other goblins a little bit stronger, but in addition to that, he allows you to sacrifice a goblin and destroy target artifact. So, Shared Animosity. Whenever a creature you control attack, it gets +1/0 for each other attacking creature that shares a creature type. So again, it's kind of basically just giving it more and more strength for it attacking. Gorgar, Disciple of Ryusei. So one of the things I really like about this, 1, Cheap Goblin. He also looks pretty sick too. Like I just like this art. 2, you get to pay a red and gives all your creatures haste, which is pretty insane. So you can be able to make Krenko pretty easily give it haste. And this thing it only has 1 if you have like Goblin Warlord or Goblin Chief Warlord on there. So Goblin Warstrike is it's a good card. It's basically it just can kill anything. If you have like a lot of goblins on the creature on the field, like either pretty quickly or in the mid game to late game, you just play 1. You're gonna be able to potentially burn somebody up to how many goblins you have on the board, which is usually quite a bit. We have War Driver, again just another cheap goblin. He does have Battle Cry, but doesn't really come up too often. In the Web of War, just another means of giving our creatures haste and +2/0 whenever they enter the battlefield. Brightstone Ritual, it's basically another way of getting just quick, fast mana. There's another card similar to this ability. Where is it? It's basically a second copy of Battle Hymn. The only difference is the wording. Battle Hymn, it just is creatures, while this is for goblins. But again, it pretty much does the same thing. And this is actually cheaper too by 1. Massive Raid, kind of like the same idea as some of our other cards. Deal damage equal to a target creature or player, equal to the number of the creatures you control. Again, just make goblins, you're good. Skullclamp is pretty good. The only thing I don't like about Skullclamp is like when we get to the mid to late game, if we have like all of our artifacts that just boost our goblins, then this is kind of like a dead card. So I'm still trying to figure out if I want to keep it or if I need to like tune the deck out a little bit more. But Skullclamp, when it works really well. We have Found Street Denizen, again just a cheap red goblin. But whenever another red creature enters the battlefield, it gets +1/0 until the end of the turn, which is nice because just stacking up the power can be really beneficial. And then lastly, for the final creature, we have Goblin Chieftain. Basically gives all our other creatures haste and +1/+1. I say other creatures because like pretty much 98% of our creatures are goblins, so it just works out. Next, basically the lands. There's not a lot of distinct variety in here. So we have Temple of the False God. Again, it's just pretty good. Having 1 land do 2 is really nice, especially in the mid to late game. We also have the Forgotten Cave. It's also good for just draw 2 because you could cycle it if you really need to. And then everything else are basically snow-covered lands. Beautiful lands, beautiful lands. But yeah, not the most competitive deck, but this deck can really pop off and do really, really wonderful things. I do plan, especially now getting more back into Commander, I want to do some fine tuning, have some fun with the deck, and also build some other decks. I think what I'm also going to do is the same idea and concept. I'll probably just upload some of the decks I do currently have in my possession and just work with them over some time as new sets drop and just as things change. But yeah, hope you all enjoyed this. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. And I will see you all later.